and Distribution Executive Roundtable. Hopefully, a majority of you have been able to attend one of our live roundtables before, but if you haven't, we typically host an event 3 times a year in person, and our mission is to bring financial executives together to share knowledge and best practices. And we certainly hope that we'll be able to resume our live roundtables in the future, but we are committed to continuing these roundtables, whether virtual or live in person. So a little bit about the roundtable there. Our objectives for today's roundtable is really twofold. The first is to address a few of the hot topic FAQ items regarding the PPP loan, and to hear from our distinguished panel of manufacturing and distribution leaders regarding their efforts at getting back to business. And I know that means something different to everyone. Some people had to completely shut down. Some companies partially were open. Some changed what they were doing, and others kind of were full go. So back to business really means something different to everybody. A few housekeeping items. Hopefully you saw the email blast sent out about an hour ago for the best experience for this roundtable and the ability to ask questions via the chat feature. Make sure you chose to download the team app when you were prompted. If you choose the browser option, and that's what you're on right now and you can't see the video, go ahead and re-click that link and download the Teams app, and you can switch over then and have the ability to ask questions. We definitely encourage questions. Feel free. There's a menu bar where you should be able to click and ask questions, and we'll save some time at the end to address the Q&A session there. We're also recording this virtual roundtable. We'll be posting it on our website under our COVID-19 Resource Center. So when we're done, feel free to send that to other people inside your organization or colleagues if you feel there's some information there that you'd want them to see. We also will offer CPE credit for this roundtable. So if you need CPE credit, email info@gjmltd.com with the password that I will provide during the session. We always start our roundtable with our Manufacturer's Corner. So I'd like to welcome Bob Bobeck, a partner at GJM. He's going to discuss the latest updates regarding the PPP loan and to address some of the controversial FAQ responses that we've seen that I know a lot of companies have been contacting us about, wanting to kind of talk through some of those. From the OMA update yesterday, it was noted that the PPP no longer seems likely to run out of funds. The daily loan approval has slowed to less than $2 billion per day, but it's a good thing. So for anybody that hasn't gotten the PPP loan, there is still money there. So Bob's been following the CARES Act and the PPP loan program closely since it's been announced. And so I'll go ahead and turn it over to Bob here, and going to attempt to share my screen here. And Bob, you can take it away here.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Just a quick background in the PPP loan program. It was passed by Congress through the CARES Act at the end of March, and the first allocation had $350 billion, and that was fully allocated by April 16th. Then on April 27th, they had a new allocation of funds that totaled $310 billion, and this is the latest as of last Friday. There was about $188 billion allocated, or let's round up to $190 billion. So there's about $120 billion of unallocated PPP funds yet available for companies that have not yet applied for. You can go down 2 more slides there, Wes. So here's the allocation by states. As you can see, Ohio's in the middle column. Towards the bottom there, in round 2, they've been allocated $4.9 billion. In round 1, we were the 8th largest state with allocation of PPP funds. In round 2, we're 11th. And actually, Michigan is higher than us. As you can see, slightly up on that same middle column, you'll see Michigan at $5.8 billion. And then we go 2 more slides, I think, Wes. No, back one, I'm sorry. So here is the funds by size. And that's what we're going to talk about, this over $2 million loan. And so as you can see, most of the loans are below the 2 million. So it's 19% of the dollar amounts are over $2 million, and less than 0.31, not even half of 1% of the loans are over $2 million. So a majority of the loans are under the $2 million threshold that will have some level of scrutiny by the SBA, according to their guidance. And it looks like the average loan size now, as of Friday, was $73,000 per loan. So, the questions that we're beginning around deal with the Q&As, as Wes discussed earlier. So the SBA has decided to provide guidance on the PPP program through a question and answer format. So right now they're up to 45 questions and answers. And the one that caused a lot of, I think, angst amongst a lot of people that borrowed under the PPP program was question number 31, which came out in response to the pressure in the public space where there's large publicly traded companies that, especially in the restaurant and hospitality industry, that were allowed to draw down PPP loans if they have less than 500 employees per location. And so they were drawing down $10 million, the maximum PPP loan. And so there was a lot of pressure to say, no, it really wasn't for these type of entities. So a Q&A that came out, question number 31, was like, how do you determine if you're eligible? And again, it comes back down to the certification. And they reference the certification. So if you get a PPP loan, you have to certify that current economic uncertainty makes a loan request necessary to support the ongoing operations of the applicant. So there is no need. There is no need here. Later on, there was a question asked, number 37, if you had a line of credit available for your use, would that then disqualify you? And they refer back to question 31. And that's where they're dealing with this publicly traded companies. In the conclusion of question 31, it says, it is unlikely that a public company with substantial market value and access to capital markets will be able to make the required certification in good faith. So they're definitely targeting publicly traded companies. But there has been a lot of anxiety created. And again, there's a lot of information flowing around the internet is, do I have to pay this back? Okay, and so it comes back to uncertainty, And I think for a majority of our clients, there is a lot of uncertainty. That uncertainty is, decrease in sales orders, deferred or postponed projects, supply chain disruption, reduction in cash receipts coming in and the corresponding account receivable balances, potential loss in inventory. Maybe you have obsolete inventory now or perishable inventory that's no longer usable. And so turning back to the line of credit question, a lot of our clients had line of credits that because of, the strength in the economy coming into this pandemic were paid down. But again, a lot of those line of credits have a couple attributes that you still must follow. You have a collateral base. And that collateral base is usually account receivables less than 90 days. So if that's shrinking, your ability, even though you have a large line of credit, your ability to use it might be compromised. And also, most banks say you should not be using a line of credit to fund payroll cost. If that line of credit is there to fund receivables and inventory. So again, there was no need. The whole purpose of this program, and Congress has come out and said this over and over again, was provide a bridge to small business owners for liquidity in the economy. And again, they were encouraging business owners to use this to draw down the funds, but then pay it back out through paychecks, rent, utilities, and other eligible costs in an 8-week period. So again, they're encouraging you to draw down the money, but then turn around and pay it out to keep the economy going. And the number one reason is to keep the unemployment office from being overwhelmed. And then as people stay on payroll versus unemployment, they continue to pay in state and local taxes, which are necessary for the governments to be successful. So there's a lot of good reasons why to do, why Congress enacted this to provide the liquidity to the economy. So we're just recommending to everyone that you should document those areas that kept you up at night, those uncertainties. Now, it was clear in this question that any loans over $2 million, the SBA has the rights to come out and ask for this support. Loans less than $2 million, there is no requirement. But we're still recommending everyone document this uncertainty, and just have a clear understanding of why they felt uncomfortable and why they needed to draw the PPP loans. The last item I'd like to cover is a recent IRS ruling. It just came out about a week ago. And it was clear in Congress' intent in passing the law that the forgiveness of these PPP loans would not be taxable income. And the IRS recently ruled that they agree with that. However, they said any expenses funded with this loan forgiveness are not tax deductible. So basically, it's not taxable income, but you don't get a tax deduction. Congress came out and said that was not their intentions. And there's a lot of trade groups fighting this now. So we're just recommending everyone just hang tight on this. Hopefully we'll get future guidance on this and it will be reversed. But the intentions right now for Congress was that you would still get the tax deduction. And there was a recent law brought forward by the Senate Finance Committee to correct this if the IRS does not overturn her ruling. So those are the two big items I want to cover today. And so I'd like to turn it back over to Wes.
Thanks, Bob. We had one question that I think is kind of a question that we're hearing a lot. Some companies are considering accelerating pay for employees, staying below the 15,000 average, into the 8-week period. So for example, if someone receives June and July pay now, given June and July expected to be slow, and they would not receive pay in June and July, let's say. So by the end of 2020, total pay will not have changed. Would this qualify then for the forgiveness?
There is strong, so what's allowed is incurred and paid. And so there's been probably a lot of groups that agree that prepayment of expenses would not qualify. So you're prepaying someone for July, it probably will not qualify. Okay, you can only incur costs that are already incurred that would qualify. But there has been a lot of discussion about hazard pay. So providing employees additional compensation because they're exposed to maybe more dangerous work environment than they were prior to the pandemic. And so there is nothing out there in the law says you cannot do that. And actually, I think it's encouraged. A lot of hospitals are doing it. A lot of other organizations are doing it. I think that would be encouraged to do some sort of hazard pay increase, especially during the time they're exposed, which is right now.
Great. So thanks, Bob, for that insight. Hopefully that answers some questions that I know we've been getting a lot of calls about. And if anybody has any further questions on PPP, please reach out to your GJM contact. So as of May 4th, all Ohio manufacturers and distributors are permitted to resume operations as long as the business maintained documented social distancing and hygiene protocols under the Stay Safe Ohio order. We were talking a little bit about Michigan. It sounds like that one, that state is still looking at the end of the month, but Ohio has been May 4th. So that brings us to our topic today, which is back in business. We have 3 executives with us today that are going to share with us their experiences and insight during this pandemic. First, we have with us Matt Dixon, CFO of Spangler Candy. Matt's been with Spangler for 15 years, graduate of the University of Toledo, go Rockets, and is a GJM alumni. In his own words, he's a terrible golfer, but he tries to enjoy the damn sport anyways. I think most of us can relate to that. Matt, thanks for being here.
Thanks, Wes. Thanks for having me.
Next, we have Brian Burns, founder of Cutting Edge Countertops. Brian grew up in a family-owned business, which taught him about respect, work ethic, and persistence, leading him to be the person he is today. In 2006, Brian and his partners founded Cutting Edge Countertops, who have grown the regional business into one of the largest countertop producers in the country. Through the years, Brian has been heavily involved in all aspects of the business and is currently overseeing the strategic direction of the organization. He's been humbled along the journey of business ownership and appreciates the wins, but more importantly, learns more from the losses. Brian, thanks for being here.
Glad to be here.
And finally, we have Chuck Bills, President and CEO of Ohio Logistics. Chuck attended Indiana University and in 1988 founded Ohio Logistics, who successfully operates 23 locations serving 6 states and over 5 million square feet of state-of-the-art warehouse space. Ohio Logistics is based in Findlay, Ohio, and one of the largest privately held logistic firms in the Midwest. Now, Chuck's what I would call old school cool. He told us that he'd present, and when I told the group it would be video, he called me up and he said, "Wes, I don't have a camera on my computer." So being the young guy that I am, I was taken back for a second. I really didn't know how to respond. But he's got a really good IT group there, and he looks great with the Ohio Logistics sign. So we appreciate him, and thanks for being here, Chuck, with us.
Thank you. These Zoom meetings have been educational for me.
It's great. So I want to kick it off. The first question that I have, and we'll start with you, Brian. How has your company really adapted to the current environment we're in? So maybe kind of set up the timeline of all of this and kind of how did you guys adapt?
Yeah, so I'm really blessed to have a great team around me. And so immediately when things started to kind of go sideways, we created a COVID response team that we started meeting daily. And really that team was the one that orchestrated our layoff plan, in the process of the reopening plan. But we were really focused on simply getting through this pandemic. And this particular team, that was their entire day, and that was their entire focus. So I think just a lot of focus up front that kind of put us ahead of the curve really has paid off in the end. I think you might be muted, Wes.
Oh, sorry. There we go. Matt, how about Spangler? How did you guys adapt to the current environment?
Yeah, so when it started, and believe it or not, Spangler, we're technically essential because we make a food product, even though it's candy. But sort of at the beginning, quickly sort of realized that we had some people that weren't comfortable working. So we did a voluntary layoff. That was initially accepted by about 70 people. Once the government juiced the unemployment bennies, that doubled and went up to almost 140 people that took it. And so similar to Brian, our management committee was meeting daily every morning. I think we even had some days where we had a couple of meetings just to kind of stay abreast with everything that was going nationally and in Ohio. And our HR group really did a fantastic job of keeping everybody updated once we knew, via memos or announcements and things to kind of, keep everybody abreast of the changes, because things are changing. They change so quicker than anything that I've ever seen in my career. It's been hard to keep up, honestly.
And Chuck, a little different, maybe from the logistics perspective, spread out. How did you guys adapt to the current environment?
Well, we've been fortunate. I'm not one to use the word essential. I think all of us are essential, but our customer base allowed us to remain open. We sat down with all of our associates in all of our locations. Once we understood the CDC guidelines, we set up team leaderships in all the locations to implement those guidelines and then just be responsive to our customers. We're I always say that we don't know what we're going to do that day until the truck backs up to the door. So we've been on a reactive mode. Most of our customers have been open and closed, so we've been reacting to their needs. The supply chain's a little bit different. As the automotive company shut down, their materials were still coming in. So our outbounds weren't reconciling to our inbounds. So we've actually had to go out and find additional space, temporary space, which has been a challenge in Northwest Ohio. But hats goes off to our folks. Once we explain the CDC guidelines, all of our groups within our buildings are doing the sanitation and it just seems like we've come together. It's been nice to walk our buildings and talk to our associates. A little challenging with the face mask from a communication perspective, but we've kind of taken that to a different level now. We have we're deciding each building who has the weirdest, wildest, flamboyant face mask. They're trying to bring a little light to this. So we've remained open and continued to rely on the guidelines from the state, federal, and then work with our associates.
Great. And then, right when this started, I think all companies were looking at their costs pretty quickly. Brian, what were some of the cost-cutting decisions that you kind of tried to make right away, and how has that kind of looked going through the process here?
It's one of those. This is one of those events where you can kind of place yourself thinking back on where you were when certain events had to happen. And the day that we really decided we had to cut some payroll costs, it was a bad day. And so we asked all of our managers and supervisors to go through, and we figured we had to scale back about 40% of our employees, overnight. So that was really, really difficult to do. But we felt that we had to have a company to come back to, right? So we had to make those difficult decisions. So cutting the payroll costs was our primary cost-cutting savings. As far as managing cash flow, we reached out to all our major vendors and landlords and renegotiated terms. A couple of those things changed as the PPP loan was more descriptive on lease payments and things like that. But everyone that was kind of within our inner circle kind of jumped on the bandwagon and really pulled through and did a really nice job on getting through that first phase of survival mode.
That's good. And Matt, I think you had said that some of yours happened naturally with the voluntary layoffs and the reduction of T. Can you talk a little bit about kind of how that process worked?
Yeah, so for ours, it was the voluntary layoff, which ironically, Brian, was taken up by about 40% of our union workforce, at least, because we're a union shop. So there's definitely some different requirements to go through when you're doing a layoff in that type of environment. And then just the travel entertainment for our sales folks. I mean, that grinded to a halt, and they very quickly adapted to the new kind of remote sales environment. But from kind of an overall perspective, kind of our entire overhead picture and cost structure, we've kind of taken an approach that we don't really have enough information right now to decide what we need to do, and we don't think we will until July, August. So, we did, prior to the PPP loan, kind of on a opportunistic basis, got some new debt, and debt is fairly new for us, as you know, Wes. We got some as part of an acquisition 2 years ago, and then we got some this year, again, right before the PPP money came out, just because we thought it was the right thing to do, and we did have some concerns about cash flow, as every organization probably does. So for us, once we get another couple of months in, it'll really tell the tale as the consumer, both our family consumer and our business consumer who gives away our product, typically giving away those dum-dums, which is a big part of our business. What happens? How does that come back? What does it look like? What's the psychology of that giveaway market? But until then, we're still pressing forward.
It's great. And Chuck, maybe walk us through a little bit. Did you guys have to do layoffs? And if so, what is your current staffing strategy? Are you looking to hire more since there's a bigger pool and you might be able to get better talent? When do you plan on bringing them back if you did do layoffs, or maybe you didn't do any? What's your strategy for staffing?
Twofold. One, when the automotive sector went down, our New York operation was hit pretty hard. So we had to reduce that staff by 20%, gradually bringing some folks back as we've picked up some new accounts. This has been a time where we've picked up a couple new customers, mainly in the food business, and so we're able to bring some of our folks back. We have hired 2 additional leadership positions. Some of our customers who were reducing their staff do this. They kind of like, I think, Matt, they just don't know where they're going to be at for sure. So they went ahead and made some decisions, and we were able to hire 2 folks with a higher level and with a manufacturing background, which we think will help us from a logistics, better understanding manufacturing. So we've been up and down. We felt we were going to be in good shape until the automotive folks went down, and that had a big impact on our New York. Had an impact on our Ohio trucking division. We mainly hauled for the automotive companies based here in Findlay, but we've been able to pick up a couple other loads. There's a couple carriers who are big in food, and they needed power, so we were able to get our drivers and power on with them. So all in all, with I think we were 450 associates. I think we're down about 20%. Well, no, that's just New York. I'm going to say as a whole, we may be down 10%.
Okay.
And our hope is, as we continue we're bidding on some new business right now that we'll bring those folks back. And then some of our folks, especially in Ohio, have been able to move around. So if Findlay was down a little bit, Fostoria is up, our folks would move around with this.
Great. And Brian, how about cutting edge? I know you had to lay off. You just talked about laying off some people. What's your staffing strategy at the moment?
Yeah, so we've been bringing people back now for about 2 weeks, and as business starts to turn around, we've pretty much called everybody back just to get a kind of a flavor of where they're at. And we've had some pushback on people that don't want to come back because they're getting the $600 bonus unemployment benefits. And but no, we've probably we've rehired about 20%, I'd say, to date. So we're about 20% down right now, and it's been strategic. Our business kind of flows through as far as the sales side all the way to the installation side. So it's been strategic, and we've been hiring people back more liberally than we probably would have without the PPP loan, but we're not hiring people back to come sit around and do nothing either. So they've got to be productive members, but we're getting a lot of projects done that have been kind of on the back burner for a while, which is nice.
That's good. And Matt, I know you have had most people return now. How is morale on the floor?
Yeah, we just talked about that yesterday. Surprisingly, it's actually pretty good. I mean, everybody's called back as of May 4th. Again, we had about 130 on layoff. We've only had 8 who have taken advantage of one of the leaves, the FFCRA leave. I think we had 5 that were personal leave and 3 that were on the child care side of that, which was a lower number than I had expected. But since we have everybody doing the masks, we've got all the social distancing, because we're a food plant, FDA and all the food safety certifications from a sanitation perspective, we were already in a position to handle all of that. So morale's actually pretty decent. I think everybody kind of has rallied around, and it feels like they're doing their part. And to Brian's point on the PPP, the reason, without those funds and some of the uncertainty in our business, we would not have called all those people back on May 4th. I'm not sure when we would have. It probably would have been much more staggered and a much more cautious approach. So that definitely changed the decision matrix there for sure.
And maybe Matt, continue maybe a little bit more on what you've had to do on the floor. Specifically, you talked about masks. You talked a little bit about the 6 feet distancing. Maybe go a little bit further, taking temperatures, break room changes, maybe talk just a little bit more about that.
Yeah, sure. All the above. So we've been doing the temperatures. Everybody comes in, taking the temperature as they come into the main entrance. Everybody's required to wear a mask now. We do have some operations in the kitchens where it gets a little hot, so we've experimented with face shields in that area in lieu of a mask for those areas, just from a comfort standpoint. We've got the 6-foot markers. We've got one directional through our break room. We've through our locker room, arrows and 6 feet directionals to get people in and out of there quickly. We've expanded our break room into the manufacturing facility and removed chairs, kind of like you've seen at some establishments to encourage that social distancing. We've also talked about doing some things to keep people out of the locker rooms, maybe doing some temporary paper, because we have uniforms, some paper smocks, which we haven't yet implemented. We've got some workstations that are very close together. We put up some barriers there, just kind of repurpose some barriers that were other places. So just trying to do what's reasonable. We've actually had, I heard this yesterday, one person who decided to quit because they didn't want to wear the mask. That was one of the specific things mentioned. But otherwise, I think everybody has seen and heard enough about this that as long as they're not a high risk individual with some of the conditions and they can see that we're doing things. And one of the big things we did, Wes, is we sent out a memo to all those who were off on the voluntary layoff, explaining to them what we had changed and what will be different when they come back, to kind of give them some peace of mind. And the feedback we've gotten from that is that really went a long way to kind of give credibility. And our CEO and president, who are out there in a fishbowl office that can be seen from the floor, are sitting in their offices wearing masks most of the day as well. So from the top down, kind of we're all in this together. And as a family business, it's kind of always been that way, and it continues through the pandemic.
And Brian, I mean, with your product, right, it's going in people's homes, and so there's installers. So how has that been impacted, and what kind of procedures are there?
So when this whole thing started, we were still installing essential jobs, and people that didn't have kitchens, no running water, no way to wash their dishes, still were deemed essential. So we've been, practicing social distancing and really being cautious in the homes. All of our installers are obviously wearing masks. We're also disinfecting everything that we touch, letting the customers know not to touch anything that we touch for at least 6 hours after we leave. We're making phone calls prior to arrival to make sure that there's nobody sick in the house. The installers are also asking those questions, and really just as they approach the customer, they're gauging their comfort level too. I think during this whole pandemic, we've all talked to different people with different comfort levels, and so we just have to ask the questions and just to kind of get on the same page as the customer, so they're not uncomfortable in their own home. That's the last thing we want. People are giving us space. A lot of times, we're working on job sites, and everybody's curious to see what our guys are doing. So that curiosity is kind of taking a back seat, and they're kind of going back in their living rooms and watching TV while we're doing our work.
That's good. And Chuck, let's talk a little bit about communication. You're obviously all over the country, and how have you communicated with your workers, your customers, your vendors? How has communication changed when, I think you had said earlier that you've banned travel internally in the company. So how have you changed communication? How do you communicate with all your stakeholders?
From an associate perspective, location, we have a daily 10 o'clock update call. In the early days, those were a lot of questions, a lot of uncertainty, would take hour and a half. Now they're 5-10 minutes at the most. But it's the same topic to ensure that we're doing the requirements from a sanitation perspective, from a social distancing. For the most part, our folks were already 6 feet apart. They're forklift operators operating in 200,000 plus square foot buildings. We've had to do some separation of our administrative, where they were just able to take their workstations and move a little bit farther away, or we spread some desks out. So it's daily communications, and we also do a weekly update to our customers, advising them of the steps that we continue to take. We have had 3 confirmed cases, which we update our customer on those cases. In all, we were thankful that they were found on a Friday or confirmed on a Friday. We sanitized our buildings on a Saturday, and we were back up and running on a Monday. So we've had no customer downtime with respect to that. and more importantly, the individuals are all back to work now. So I think from our perspective, it's been the daily phone calls. The initial phone calls and conversations were much longer. Today they're about about 5-10 minutes, and then our weekly newsletter to our customers, just advising them the practices that we continue to have in place. And then when we had the 3 confirmed, the steps we took with respect to those.
Great. Let's talk a little bit about the PPP loan. Brian, maybe let's start with you. Can you talk about how the impact of the PPP loan has had to your business?
Well, after we got through the period of time where seemed like it was changing hourly, we started to get our hands around it, and we were one of the lucky ones to get funded pretty early. I think our funding was on the 18th of last month. So it kind of gave us a boost of confidence. The cash flow was not going to be an issue. Like I said before, it gave us a little bit of confidence that we could bring back some people maybe earlier than when we would have. Typically, we're going to really want to see some track records and trends of revenue streams before we hire. And so this allowed us to kind of do some projections and predictions. And before we actually saw the numbers, we were able to bring people back proactively. So it's enabled us to ramp up a little quicker. So it has really helped our mindset as we kind of get back to normal.
How about you, Matt? How has PPP loan affected your business?
I guess the first thing, having a strong banking relationship to start with really helped. Our loan funded on April 9th, which was before any other colleague that I've talked to before had funded. And without those, the kind of the known funds and that injection, I don't know that we would have done a voluntary layoff. I think we probably would have done, a full layoff. As we progressed through the month of April, our sales were down 55%. And at retail, depending on the channel, we're down anywhere from 25 to 75%, product moving off the shelf. So it's significant. And we still have to build for a one-turn season, as you know, Wes. We've got a lot of Halloween and Christmas stuff, and there's only so much Christmas capacity, so you kind of have to keep humming with that. And we think Christmas is going to be quote unquote normal for the candy cane part of our business, but Halloween and what that looks like and whether there is one and whether there's trick-or-treating and all of these other things, we just really don't know. And so it definitely was a shot in the arm. We kept operating at about 60% capacity even during the voluntary layoff. And additionally, kind of to compete and keep people working, we were able to pay a $300 weekly bonus to those who chose to stay and work, both union and non-union folks. And that was something that, we had decided to do early on, and then end up having to kind of up the ante a little bit once the federal unemployment benefits kicked in. So that was something that was important as well. And again, without the backstop of the PPP, some of those decision processes, they just look different.
Yep. And Chuck, this is a question for all three of you. We'll start with Chuck. What is your biggest concerns with getting back to business?
I think right now it'd be capacity. If you listen to some politicians, some economic forecasters, that this is going to be a big boom. It's beating the capacity from a physical facility and from a labor. We were fully employed prior to this, and hopefully people are going to be able to go back to work. So it's being able to get the labor in the physical facilities.
Okay, Brian, what's your biggest concerns?
Yeah, for us, it's really seeing what's behind the wave that's crashing down on us right now. We like I mentioned earlier, we were only doing what we deemed essential projects. So we've got all these non-essential customers that we're trying to get to now, that we've been bringing people back, and we can work a little more freely. So we're experiencing a pretty big slingshot effect. And we're really, really busy right now, and we haven't been able to restaff at a 100% level. So we're still only operating at about 75, 80% of capacity versus the 50% we were operating last couple months. but really just the unknown of what the next 6 months of revenues are going to bring after the whole PP's extinguished, and we're kind of moving back into normal business decision making mode. It's just there's a big unknown, so it's hard to make decisions.
Yeah, and Matt, you touched on it a little bit. Any more on kind of some of the concerns? I know you're talking about the seasons and the different holidays. Any other concerns that you have with getting back to business?
Yeah, I mean, from an operational perspective, things are operating, okay now that we brought people back. But the concern is the consumer behavior and reopening of the economy, and what will that look like? We positioned our product as a giveaway business, and big bags that you buy at Sam's Club, where you can buy 500 lollipops in a bag that, a bank manager or salon or barbershop or doctor's office, they're giving these out. I mean, think of you or your children and their first experience with our product. We just don't know what that looks like going forward. We can't see it. We don't know when. We don't know how. We don't know how businesses are going to react. I mean, you go into a bank, you and your kid, you have a mask on. The last thing you're thinking about is grabbing the lollipop out of that dish that, has been touched by, maybe the other people. So how do we overcome that? Do we overcome that? And do we need to think about, how our product reaches the end consumer differently? It's a really big deal. And there's a lot, to Brian's point, that we don't know, that over the next several months will become clear. And once that happens, we're going to have some really challenging decisions that we may have to make.
Chuck, maybe talk a little bit about, you said you found there were 3 employees that had tested positive for COVID. Talk a little bit more about maybe what your internal plan is. Should there be more, that would test positive, and what precautions, do you take after you find out that somebody has tested positive?
Yeah, let me back up to listening to Matt. It dawned on me, Matt, in all of our locations, we have a candy dish at the reception. And my wife's heading to Costco this afternoon and wanted to know if we needed more candy. And I opened the closet up and checked with all of our buildings, and we have a lot of your candy still in bags. So I'm sitting there thinking, boy, that you are at an uncertain, because walking to the bank, it is. You're not going to grab a sucker now with your face mask on. So our thoughts are with you on what that future can be. Wes, to your conversation, your question, I don't think anything will be different than what we've been doing from the very beginning. One, it's very serious. Part of our 10 o'clock call is just to remind folks that the reason we set these sanitation processes up and guidelines up is for the safety of them. I've always said our most important asset is our associates. You can find 4 walls and a roof anywhere. It's what's underneath the roof that counts, and that's our associates. So if something was to happen again, or as it did, I think it was 2 Fridays ago, I got the phone call where an individual was confirmed. We immediately got our leadership on the phone for New York, ensured that the steps were taken. Most of our associates were home. Those that have home phone numbers or ways for us to access them via phone, we called them up to advise them, so that when they did come in Monday morning, they weren't going to be surprised. We reviewed all the steps we were taking through to sanitize the building, who the sanitation company is and their background, et cetera, which we provide that information to all of our customers. So we would go through the same steps. And I feel, and just talking with our operation in Mississippi, I felt the confidence in the associates that they know that we're serious about giving them all the tools and the support so they can do their job, not just from taking care of our customers, but today one of our most important jobs is that sanitation and the protection and support of all of our fellow associates. So nothing would change. We would just continue to do what we've been doing, and hopefully with the blessing that we don't have this. I think someone asked me the other day, how long are we going to continue to have to do this? Which I said, I don't know. I said, from a sanitation perspective, I think this has been good. We've involved, our administrative folks are helping the folks in the warehouse. So it gives them a chance to be on the floor to see what all they do and the product they handle. And, now I can see why you may have made an error on that tally sheet or unloading, because I didn't know you had to unload all these parts. So it's been a good communication, a good job interaction, if you will. But I really feel good that our folks have taken pride in knowing that they're trying to help their fellow associate. And then when, this one in New York, family struggles financially, and our concern from our New York leadership was that for this person to be quarantined for 2 weeks is going to be very challenging for them. And we understood that, so we made arrangements to make sure that they continue to receive their pay and any other thing. We had groceries sent over to them, et cetera. So we would continue to do what we do, but I think a big part of what we do today will continue in our everyday life and our operations.
Yeah, well stated. Brian, any other comments on that? Do you guys have a policy if somebody were to be tested positive, and what that would look like?
Yeah, we came out, we took a lot of borrowed ideas and created a kind of a living document for all of our supervisors to follow on different scenarios. I think there was 6 scenarios that we came up with versus, if someone's tested, if they're not tested, if they have symptoms, if their family member is showing symptoms or family member's positive. So we try to make it really clear for everybody so that everybody was on the same page. We operate out of 5 different buildings, so it's hard to make sure that there's one message being sent out, but we feel like with that plan going out to our supervisors and managers, and then we also communicated through our HRIS system that goes out to all the employees with communications, including the laid off employees. We kept them active in our database. Everybody seemed to be on the same page. So we haven't, luckily, knock on wood, had any positive cases, but we have had some symptoms and had people quarantined and sent home.
And have any of the 3 companies made any new investments in technology?
No, we've not at Ohio. Well, not from we have from an operation perspective, and better integration with our customers, but not with respect to the pandemic.
Well, Chuck, didn't they have to buy you a camera?
Oh, yeah, that's right. This is a new laptop.
A new laptop.
Brian's correct. Yeah, this technology is pretty neat.
Yeah.
I always tell our folks, when I started business, I did things on the index cards, and we were one of the first to get into data. But I don't know anything about data. I just know how to hire the right people.
There you go. There you go.
Wes, we're not a cutting edge. Sorry, Brian, on the IT side of things necessarily, but we had already had some initiatives, kind of like Brian referenced the HRIS system, to kind of move to having some things available, data available, not only for our management folks, but some of our hourly folks as far as payroll and things like that. Initiatives that had already started that becomes apparent during a situation like this, how important it is to continue to move forward with those and roll those out so that we can communicate more effectively, so they have access to some of those things. And then we've also got even some of our hourly support staff working from home. And so for our IT team to kind of set people up and roll them out, people that have never had laptops before, like Chuck, and working from home, we've probably got 25 people doing that. And that's worked out well. And what I think we're going to uncover, we're not going to move paperless, but we're going to find better ways to do things, more efficient ways to do some things. And that's just through the creativity of our people working around not being in the office, not being able to print something or pass something off to the coworker. And so I think there's going to be process-wise, some good things that actually do come out of this.
Yeah, we luckily about a year ago, we put a huge push into innovation for our IT systems. And I think mid-March, we, within a matter of a day or day and a half, we moved all of our office staff to work from home. They have access to everything they need at work at home. And so we're not really in a hurry to bring people back because the systems are working pretty well. But on a consumer end, we really put a lot of time and effort into developing our website and having some essentially shop online tools in place before this ever happened. So we were toying around with rolling them out in January, February, and then we've made a hard push in March to get everything out there. So I was just pleasantly surprised through the whole shutdown phase that people were buying countertops online. So we still had some sort of a revenue stream coming down, but it was more than I would have anticipated based on using those tools. So my only hope is that we continue that progress on the IT systems, and we just don't go back to a comfort level and maybe become less efficient and not utilize those tools moving forward.
I think, Wes, if I could step in,
Yeah.
There's always good things are going to come out of it if you want them to be. And with some of our major manufacturers and with their administrative folks operate remotely, our communication was dragging because a lot of it was done scanning documents that showed us what we received, what we shipped. So it's we've had some of our larger industry leaders who now have realized the value. What we've been saying is we want to go paperless, and they stepped up their IT investment and focus so we can go paperless. So we're actually we're testing with a large appliance manufacturer to be paperless. And the first couple of weeks has been fantastic because these folks are calling us from their houses or wherever they're working remotely, saying this is so neat because I can see we're doing system integrations, and I can go into your system and see what you're shipping, what you're pulling, your inventory levels. And so the good part of the pandemic is we have customers now who are seeing the value of investing in technology, and which is going to get to a point. I don't think we'll ever be paperless, but whenever I walk into our buildings, when I see keyboards and stacks of paper, I know we're not using technology, and that's what we want to get away from is keyboards and paper.
Yeah, and that's a good transition into my last two-part question here. So maybe we'll just keep going there, Chuck. So the two-part question is, what are your biggest successes during COVID-19, which I think what you just said there was probably a good success. But then also, what have you learned from this pandemic and business interruption? What have you learned, and what would you say are the biggest successes that you've seen?
The heart in our associates, the compassion for others, just the compassion for others. We get caught. A guy told me years ago, asked me how I drove to work, and I kind of looked at him like, "What the heck does that have to do with anything?" And I said, "No, I drive this way." Because you drive to work the same way every day, and I said, "Yes." And he goes, "You need to drive to work a different way every day." He goes, "You're in a rut, which is no different than a grave, a little bit longer, a little bit deeper. Drive to work differently every day and see what's around you." And so we try to tell that with our folks. And I think our folks during this have really opened up to make sure that their fellow associate is well. We know, if someone's struggling financially or emotionally or other personal. And so now it seems like we've been willing to open up more and help our associates. So I feel good. I'm thankful that our associates have come together and are helping us get through this. So besides the technology, more importantly for me has been the camaraderie of our associates.
That's great. For those that need CPE, the password for CPE is CARES. So again, if you need CPE, at the end we'll tell you, but it's info@gjmltd.com. Please email with the password CARES. We'll get you the CPE credit. Matt, let's go to you. How about what's something that you've learned from the pandemic, and maybe one of your biggest successes that you've noted?
Well, unfortunately, I've learned that it's possible to have a precipitous drop in sales more quickly than I could have ever imagined for a product that's been around for so long and is just sort of kind of in the fabric of kind of America a little bit, kind of Americana, just a very sort of traditional brand, and that's been scary. And how this story ends is still to be determined. As Brian said earlier, there's a lot of uncertainty, and for us, it's just kind of a bit of a waiting game. As far as a big success, I mean, we've been able to keep our people safe. We're in Williams County. There's 40,000 people in our county, 8,500 people in Bryan, Ohio. We've not had any positives. We've done the right thing. We met with our union up front when we were talking about doing voluntary layoffs, got them on board. We wanted just to have an outlet for people to take who didn't feel comfortable working. We were able to do that, setting people up to work from home, being flexible, just offering, that compassion that, kind of that Chuck referenced. That's been seen. People are uncomfortable. They don't like the masks. There are things about it that obviously make people uneasy, but, we've tried to over communicate, I think. And I think particularly with our HR and operations group, I think they've done a really good job of just kind of letting people know what's going on and saying, hey, we don't have all the answers and we don't know what DeWine's going to say this afternoon or tomorrow or the next day or the next day. But these are the things that we're doing and we're going to try to do. We're going to keep you updated, and, we're in this together and we'll keep moving. And we try to remember, hey, it's let's have fun and smile. We make candy. So we come back to that quite a bit too.
Great. Brian?
I echo a lot of what Chuck and Matt just said. The resiliency that I've seen, not only with our staff, but with our customers, has been pretty amazing. We're part of the supply chain, having a pretty large wholesale network. And so our customers rely on us to produce goods for them to survive and pay their employees and keep people in their homes safely. So the resiliency is really what stands out to me. It's pretty cool, pretty impressive.
Great. And it looks like there's two questions. One for Bob. Bob, if you're still there, on the PPP, can you address the FTE issue for forgiveness?
Yeah, so I think that's what that's referring to, is that in the forgiveness calculation, you first add up your costs that are available for forgiveness, and then you have a potential reduction in the amount of forgiveness based upon a full-time equivalent test. And you measure the full-time equivalence of employees during that 8-week period of forgiveness and compare it to 2 earlier periods, one in 19 and one right before the pandemic. And the lesser of those two you compare, and if you have a reduction in employees, you might have a reduction in amount forgiven. There's no clear guidance on how to calculate FTEs. However, in the section that deals with the tax credit available, it defines it as a 30-hour week. So that's in the CARES Act. So not in the forgiveness section, but in another section of the CARES Act, it is referenced a 30-hour week. So that's what we're recommending to clients. There are also 2 potential ability to improve those FTEs. The first one is a ruling that just came out, I think yesterday or day before, that says if you attempt to hire someone back and they refuse to accept that job, you get to count them as a FTE. You must not really have to have them come back. You just make them an offer. And also there is in the CARES Act, any employees you bring back prior to June 30th could also be counted in the amount that you had hired during that 8-week period. So,
okay.
I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, great. And we've got 60 seconds left, so I'll leave it up to you guys if anybody has a parting thought on this question. Do you think the governor's handling of this pandemic has been reasonable, too aggressive, too lenient? Anybody have any strong feelings one way or another about the handling?
This is being recorded.
It is. It's being recorded.
I'm a believer in the American worker, and I think once we were told what we need to do, that we would have done that, versus being told and then to the effect it's had on people. I've sat down. I keep thinking about Matt and Spangler Candy. You don't know what your future is going to be. And I've talked to 3 or 4 small business owners who were in tears. They weren't able to get the PPP program. They weren't big enough for their bank to step them through it. They weren't big enough for their accountant to step them through it because you guys and bankers were working with us. Mm-hmm. And I felt bad, and I still feel bad. And I think for the most part, American population have good responsibility, good respect, especially when it comes to times like this. I think we were too hard. I think we are still too hard. And this is going to have a long-term effect on a lot of people in our economy and America as a whole. And I think we were a little over aggressive.
Fair enough. Fair enough. All right. Again, want to thank our panel, Matt Dixon, Brian Burns, Chuck Bills, for this great discussion. Thank everyone who joined us. I think we had 85 people on. So that's great. As I said at the beginning, this is recorded. So if anybody wants to pass it along to your members in your organization, you can go to GJMLTD.com, find it under our COVID-19 Resource Center. And again, for anybody that wants CPE, the password is CARES. Email info@gjmltd.com. Thanks again, everybody. Have a great Tuesday, and we've got warmer weather, warmer and wet weather, right, coming down. So hopefully we can get it, and everyone can get back to business. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Be safe and healthy.
Thanks, Wes. Be well.
Thank you. Great job, everybody.
Everyone take care. Thank you.